Assalamu alaikum, dear students. It's nice to meet you again. And good morning to everyone. Today's lesson is lesson number 1, Unit 5, Path to Higher Education and Eastern University by Rabindranath Tagore. This passage actually tells us about the dissatisfaction of Rabindranath Tagore about the universities of his time. I also think that the same satisfaction maybe Rabindranath would have if he existed till this time. So Rabindranath in this passage has tried to uphold the hollowness, the failure of Indian universities to make true citizens, the citizens who come out of the university and become worthy of the country, but they have failed to become worthy of the country because of their lack of moral courage, lack of ethical values, which actually mostly are the result of the failures of those universities. Now, let me share my screen. I will discuss it according to para. Okay. Let us start the slide sharing. Okay. Now Unit 15, Lesson 1, and Eastern University by Rabindranath Tagore, first paragraph. Okay. Universities should never be made into mechanical organization for collecting and distributing knowledge. See that in this para, in every para, here I have underlined some phrases and words so that we can discuss it in the later slides. Through them, the people should offer their intellectual hospitality, their wealth of mind to others and earn their proud right in return to receive gifts from the rest of the world. But in the whole length and breadth of India, there is not a single university established in the modern time where a foreign or an Indian student can properly be acquainted with the best products of the Indian. For that, we have to cross the sea and knock at the doors of France and Germany. Educational institutions in our country are India's alms bowl of knowledge. They lower our intellectual self-respect. They encourage us to make a foolish display of decorations composed of borrowed figures. See that there are some phrases are underlined and marked with red. Now let's discuss these points. Analysis. Let us start analysis of the first paragraph. First word, mechanical organizations. What does it mean? Organizations which only collect and distribute knowledge but fail to develop students' personality enriched with refined taste as per culture and heritage. So if one person only collects knowledge but fails to use that knowledge in a human perspective, in the perspective of the welfare of the community and himself or herself, this knowledge is not effective. Now come next the point, intellectual hospitality. Generous contribution to the society through sharing knowledge and experience that lead to wisdom and refinement of taste. So this is hospitality. When we say that someone is hospitable, or sometimes you are asked to write a letter to your friend thanking him for his hospitality, it means that that friend were generous in entertaining you. So here intellectual hospitality means to entertain the community, the students with knowledge, with intellectual wealth like wisdom, knowledge, experience, etc. Wealth of mind. What is wealth of mind? Wealth of pocket means money, dollar, gold. Wealth of mind, knowledge, experience, wisdom, and inspiration. These are wealth of mind because they enrich our mind. If we have knowledge, if we have experience according to our knowledge, and in that way, the knowledge becomes wisdom, and also through knowledge, we spread inspiration into our heart, into other people. Okay. Next, first paragraph, letter heart. Gifts from the rest of the world. These are not gifts of wedding parties, birthday parties. Rest of the world, the gifts here indicates knowledge, lessons from experiences, and messages of wisdom of the enlightened people of the world. So when university teachers, they disseminate knowledge, they also come across many other branches of knowledge, experiences, and wisdom given by the enlightened people, all the world. So as they teach, they also, as they give, they also receive gifts. Best products of the Indian mind. What are the best products? The ideas, the thoughts of the Indian people. Best thoughts, ideas, viewpoints, criticism, and inspirations. Also, a society cannot prosper without self-criticism. Society people must criticize their activities to achieve refinement. They also practice best thoughts and ideas into their everyday affairs, starting from personal to state affairs. India's alms bowl of knowledge. So what is alms bowl? Alms bowl means a bowl which is extended by a beggar man or beggar woman to get some help from passerby. So India's alms bowl of knowledge. What does it mean? Borrowing ideas knowledge, etc., from foreign countries and cramming these into native disciples, but not creating such great ideas themselves in light of own culture and best practices. So this is arms bowl means actually these universities are borrowing knowledge only from foreign countries. There's nothing wrong with borrowing knowledge because one institution cannot be totally complete with all the branches of knowledge, and knowledge has no limit. So, but what's the problem? Problem is cramming these into native disciples. To cram means to give someone without allowing him or her to understand this. So, if we do not understand what we are learning, then we cannot practice these things into our affairs of life. So ultimately, this knowledge does not become fruitful. This is what actually has happened in case of the universities of the time of Rabindranath. This is why uh, all through these uh, passages, he has given vent to his dissatisfaction. Now let's move to the second paragraph. Man's intellect has a natural pride in its own aristocracy, which is the pride of its culture. Culture not only acknowledges the excellence, whose criticism is in its inner perfection, not in any external success. When this pride succumbs to some compulsion of necessity or lure of material advantage, it brings humiliation to the intellectual. Modern India, through her very education, has been made to suffer this humiliation. Once she herself provided her children with a culture which was the product of her own ages of thought and creation. So in this era, Rabindranath has become rather nostalgic, and he has uh, cast some what negative views about what happens when we lose our inner perfection. That is, man's intellect has a natural pride in its own aristocracy, which is the pride of its culture. Naturally, we are proud of our culture. Sometimes we find that a community who live in jungle, they have their own culture and they are proud of it. So when this cultural pride fails to get its inner perfection, then this leads to actually yielding to or being defeated to some compulsion of necessity. That means that if we do not have inner perfection, what happens? We actually surrender to our necessity, material advantage. And then actually it doesn't make us great, rather it brings humiliation to an educated person. And according to Rabindranath, once India's people practice uh, their own cultural thoughts and ideas and creativities into their everyday affairs, but now uh, these days were gone by, and now they actually suffer this humiliation. Now let's see phrase-wise analysis. Inner perfection. What does inner perfection mean? Perfection achieved in terms of great values, sense of humanity to be practiced and maintained in a culture. Inner perfection means all the good values, great values, values full of morality, ethical standard, humanity. These are actually what? Uh, these are conducive to receive inner perfection. We have to practice as a community all these good values to achieve inner perfection. Succumbs to some compulsion of necessity. What does succumbs to mean? Succumbs to means to surrender, to keep away from cultural perfection and pride due to material advantage. When we look for too much material advantage. When we are busy to get our worldly needs fulfilled, then we stay away, or we somewhat um, move away from our cultural pride, from our inner perfection, from our values, the product of our own ages of thought and creation. Cultural behaviors and practices were based on their own thoughts and creative activities of the age they lived in. So this is about the nostalgic thought of Rabindranath when in his time he found out that India was once able to cultivate those creative thoughts into the hearts of Indian people. Now, Indian universities nowadays fail to do this. This is the cause of sorrow for Rabindranath, cause of dissatisfaction. Now let us move to the remaining part of second paragraph. But it has been thrust aside. What has been thrust aside? See that? The perfection, okay? The product of our own ages and thought. But it has been thrust aside, and we are made to tread the meal of passing examination. What happens now? The universities are no more encouraging their students to cultivate good values. Rather, they are making them ready for passing examinations, not for learning anything. Still, they are not learning anything, but for notifying that we are qualified for employments under organizations conducted in English. So ultimately, universities are helping graduates to pass out with a qualification that will help them to get good jobs. Our educated community is not a cultured community. See that I have underlined this sentence. We'll discuss it in the next slide. But a community of qualified candidates. Meanwhile, the proportion of possible employments to the number of claimants has gradually been growing narrower. It means that actually the scope of employments and the number of candidates, the ratio has become lower. Then what happens? Actually, many of them are deprived of jobs, and also they are deprived of the fulfillment of their dreams. At last, the very authorities who are responsible for this are blaming their victims. Such is the perversity of human nature. It bears its worst grudge against those it has injured. So these are the lines, underlined lines we should discuss next. The sentences or the phrases, our educated community is not a cultured community. What does it mean? The main purpose of the educated people is to get good jobs by any means, fair or foul. But they fail to appreciate the good values and practices of their culture, which make them refined and humane, and thus true cultural beings. So they have had education, but they lack moral values, the values of good taste, ethical standards, etc. Ultimately, they cannot become cultured community, refined community with refined taste. At last, the very authorities who are responsible for this, blaming their victims. Universities fail to produce refined and human people, maintaining good values and practices of their culture. But the concerned authorities put the blame on the graduates who come out of these universities with these terrible drawbacks and hollowness. See that the tragedy lies with the university graduate is that they are the product of the universities, but when they fail to show their good values and high ethical standard, the authorities blame them. Whereas the authorities themselves are responsible for creating such graduates. third para. In the Bengali language, there is a modern maxim which can be translated, he who learns to read and write, writes in a carriage and pair. In English, there is a similar proverb, knowledge is power. It is an offer of a prospective bride to the student, a promise of an ulterior reward, which is more important than knowledge itself. See that? So actually from the beginning of our life, infancy, we are given a sort of bribe. The writer has mentioned it as a bribe that if we have knowledge, we can ride a car. If we have knowledge, we can be powerful, but hardly we are uh, instructed or advised that if we have knowledge, we can be good human beings. So always there is an ulterior reward. Ulterior means it's hidden to achieve a particular purpose. What is the particular purpose? To become materially great and powerful. But here, the need for knowledge, the value of knowledge itself is ignored. It's not given that much importance. Now, let us go to the fourth paragraph. Unfortunately, our very education has been successful in depriving us of our real initiative and our courage of thought. Here, actually, this is a tone of satire. The writer is here maintaining a satirical tone, a tone of mocking. The training we get in our schools has the constant implication in it that it is not for us to produce, but to borrow. And we are casting about to borrow our educational plans from European institutions. The trampled plants of Indian corn are dreaming of recouping their harvest from the neighboring wheat field. To change the figure, we forget that for proficiency in walking, it is better to train the muscles of our own legs than to strut upon wooden ones of foreign make, although they clatter and cause more surprise at our skills in using them. If they were living and real. Okay, let us go to the point. So the writer has blamed the universities or very education that this education or the system of education is depriving the students of their real initiative. What is the real initiative? The student, they will learn, they will earn knowledge, and thereby uh, they will cultivate values of their society, and they will be enlightened human beings, and they will have courage of thought. So if we are not courageous in our thought, how can we think of new things? Because newness brings some sort of uncertainty, and we have to have courage to face this uncertainty before we practice our thought into action. The training we get in our school, what is this? That we have to borrow only. We don't need to produce. That is, we have to borrow ideas from other countries, other institutions of foreign land, but we have no responsibility to produce our own ideas to give it to the rest of the world as gifts. But we are casting about to borrow our educational plans from European institutions. Okay, we are borrowing plans. Now see the metaphor. The trampled plants of Indian corn are dreaming of recouping their harvest from the neighboring wheat fields. Now, see that if a farmer finds that his corns are damaged, can the damage be made by the neighboring wheat fields? Can the recovery be made until, uh, is it possible that the Indian corns are damaged and it is trying to recover the damage from the neighboring wheat fields? No. So it's not simply possible by borrowing ideas, by uh, getting some help from it. It does not have its own strength, a culture, educated community. They cannot survive the onslaught of uh, mm, change, onslaught of new ideas, which bring uncertainty. So to change the figure, we forget that for proficiency in walking, it is better to train the muscles. Okay, fine. If I want to run faster, I have to train my muscle, the muscles of my leg. I should not use a wooden leg to show my, say that a robotic leg to show my skill, because this thing will to run this robotic leg, I will need greater skill. Then I would feel comfortable if I could use my, if I could make my muscles stronger. So what we have to do, actually, if we want to succeed, the main message, we have to depend on our own strength, so that if we find that our strength is not enough, we can increase, we can uh, augment our skill and strength to a particular purpose. So let us think about the particular phrases: depriving us of our real initiative and our courage of thought. The education we receive is not effective in fulfilling our real purpose of becoming good human beings, as well as people of refined cultural taste. So this system of education failed to make us good human beings and refined people. Not for us to produce, but to borrow. I have already discussed it. Our students are trained to use ideas of other communities instead of their own, and in doing this, they fail to be creative in their thoughts and ideas, and thus lose their confidence and courage of thinking about from new and greater perspectives. This is what is happening. When I constantly am busy with other people's thoughts and borrow ideas, I lose my own creative faculties. Better to train the muscles. I've already discussed that. If we want to run faster, we have to train the muscles of our leg instead of using a robotic leg. Okay. Now, what about the fifth paragraph? Is a very good paragraph. It focuses on the strengths of the foreign universities. But when we go to borrow help from a foreign neighborhood, we overlook the fact that among the Europeans, the living spirit of the university is widely spread in their society, their parliament, their literature, and the numerous activities of their corporate life. In all these functions, they are in perpetual touch with the great personality of the land, which is creative and heroic in its constant acts of self-expression and self-sacrifice. They have their thoughts published in their books, as well as through the medium of living men who think those thoughts and who criticize, compare, and disseminate them. This is a very good paragraph which focuses on the foreign universities or Europeans who actually practice the wisdom of their great people into their society, their parliamentary activities, their creating their literature, and their business life. And all these functions, all these activities, they maintain the perpetual touch with the great personality. That is, in all their activities, they follow those message, those lessons of the great personality. And this this closeness of the personality actually make them creative and heroic in acts of self-expression and self-sacrifice. That is, when they express their ideas, when they do some self-sacrifice, they do it in very diverse ways, and they are full of pride about it. They have their thoughts published in their books, as well as through the medium of living men who think those thoughts and who criticize, compare, and disseminate them. Now let us discuss. The living spirit of the university. The true teachings and spirit received by the European students uh, or communities are kept alive as they practice these ideals in their social life, statecraft, literature, and business affairs. Creative and heroic in its constant acts of self-expression, and self-sacrifice. In maintaining all their affairs and attitudes, the European students and communities practice the true teachings and ideals of their great personalities in a way which is diverse, full of courage and self-sacrifice. They do not hesitate. The latter part, some at least of the drawbacks of their academic education are redeemed by the living energy of the intellectual personality pervading their social organism. It is like the stagnant reservoir of water which finds its purification in the showers of rain, to which it keeps itself open. But to our misfortune, we have it in India, all the furniture of the European university, except the human teacher. We're running short of time. Living energy of the intellectual personality, the true teachings and ideals of their great personalities, which are constantly practiced in every affairs of a community. The intellectual personality, true, the living energy. The human teacher, the teachers who are able to transform an average person into a productive being with strong moral values and ethical stance in everything he or she does in every sphere of life. This is human teacher. That we have all the furnitures of universities, but we fail to create good students because as teachers we are not human. Now let me actually stop sharing my screen. Okay, so these are all with up to fifth paragraph, and I think that the topic is rather it requires deep reading. We have discussed up to unit para 5, and I hope we can finish it in the next class. This is one of the, I think that difficult to understand passage just the EFT. Try to read it again and again. And if you have any query, please ask me in the next class after we have finished discussion. And in the meantime, I hope you will go through the rest of the passages, try to find out new word meanings, and so try to find, work out the next exercises based on this lesson. Thank you all for listening to me, and try to be safe and sound at home and attend your lessons. Thank you all for. Assalamu alaikum.